Okay. Before we begin, thank you guys all for coming today in the demo debate between Ohm and then Harris. Ohm is affirming in today's debate on the policy side. Harris is negating on the critical side. We have Nate here as well, always. So yeah. Just in the meantime, while Ohm's getting the doc out, people should just get flow sheets up, whether that's paper or Excel sheets. Um, you know, organize your docs on your computer. Just get ready to be floating this around.
Okay, I'll just send out, yeah, okay, I sent it in the Zoom chat. Since like more people are joining, I'll also send it out later, just so, everybody who joins after I send it can get it.
I'll be asking some questions, by the way, for everyone who's watching throughout. So if you have any responses, feel free to just unmute. You can also type in chat, whatever works like that.
Okay, I think I'm good to start. Prateek, do you think we're good? Okay.
Yeah. For people, just one quick check before we begin. If anyone doesn't have the doc or needs a second, just say something right now aloud or just type in chat. Either should work. Okay. If yeah, I guess if no one's saying any objections, then we can go ahead and start.
Okay. When the United States ought to become party to the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. The advantage is credibility. Scenario one is the Arctic failure to exceed feeds a negative credibility loop with Russia that causes Arctic isolation and collapses collective action. That's an impact filter for every risk maker. 24. Russia would offer Uniclose Moscow not recognize U.S. ECS claims because U.S. not a party, not defer to UN generally. Develops ECS disputes, bilateral mediation, circumvent procedure, cherry pick practices, provide ammo, to refuse voluntary protocols like Uniclose, rely on mutual enforcement, hypocrisy, foster accelerated military buildup, paramilitary extending grievancy to U.S. non-participation before relating to strategic stability, negative credibility loop escalates to real threats, destabilizing pattern, counterproductive allied interest, timing attacks on infrastructure, environment, proliferation, terror, ratifying in close boasters, liberal governance, countering accusations of opportunism, just like domestic chaos, and reap diplomatic benefits. The Arctic is prime for escalation due to Russian claims over the Northern Sea route, which are explicitly tied to declining faith in Uniclose. Belushi 24. Ukraine not alter Russia's Arctic posture, projects itself through low intensity war, risk of Moscow can escalation, perceive enlargement of native feeling vindication and vulnerability honed by propagandistic narrative, planning for all contingencies, including open confrontation, receding CI's leadership, fierce bringing military activity from native could increase on also willingness to probe absence of communication between Russia and Arctic 7 lead to escalation. Restraint cannot be for granted. Mannerism is held pertains to legal status NSR internal waters covered by law of the sea. Russia clearly violating the Uniclose, interjecting passage to foreign assets appropriate NSR no link to Uniclose to respond to fear of encirclement. Ratifying Uniclose bolsters security and improves Arctic Council dispute resolution, which specifically resolves NSR disputes. Kirkpatrick 24. U.S. hinders Arctic Council without ratifying U.S. submit claims CCL. CS receive recommendation for establishing torture, precludes other states from finalize a claims absence, weakens its rights with Russia without a sea, weakens negotiating over maritime issue ratification, provide legal protection for maritime interests and resources, free counsel, but to bypass disagreements that settle under Uniclose rather than cooperate with ill-equipped internal disputes and security. All states read settle through CLCS and start depend on classification or orderly settlement. But anyone council knows routes operating in specialty. Arctic expansion sparks nuclear war with Russia. Clear. Money. The Arctic becomes site of a geopolitical struggle as Russia increases maritime capabilities. The clash escalated to nuclear. Putin raised possible nuclear escalation. Clash initiates a catastrophic spiral. Extinction. Battlefield 17 and a nuclear between U.S. and Russia. Aftermath and massive smoke to atmosphere cause ozone loss. Nuclear intertropical temperature. pressures make it impossible to go free threat of extinction greater only possible between US and Russia, have 90% of new small war unlikely to lead to extinction risk greater than from Russia. Scenario 2 is that SES Chinese gray zone encroachment causes quick escalation. Craft 24 China encroach on waters over Philippines have rise with unclosed gray zone tactics maintain harassment, make China concerned duty, emphasize that China develop nuclear triad forces being moderates against Philippines, moderates capability, increases confidence in intensifying conflicts relationship with US incentive enable potential US forces drag the Philippines into Taiwan. Question basis magnitude of nuclear attacks unforeseen incident SES closely because of high tension scenario involves Taiwan or China force reunification forces targeted by China. Immediate and clear ratification shores alliances and checks back against expansion. Carbon 24 intensity and efficiency of gray zone activity, increase access to bases, allows superior massive fleets, modernization of Coast Guard, enables law enforcement, creating regularized present knowledge already. Resident Japan dealt with patrols for 15 years. Philippines currently contending American policy in the seas, ill-suited phone apps, ineffective practices and narrow self-interest efforts to change law disrupted by prompt US ratification in close gray zone approach exploits ally benefits from US failing to pursue declarative policy CL, not meet contemporary environment self-extension, providing rules to legalistic delete consent, single new capability to bolster loose space order. China follows UNCLOS but non-ratification creates revisions. The plan reverses that to a clear non-legalistic message. Cardin 20 legal challenge changes arise through revised interpret UNCLOS China's unfortunate veto over disputed waters ad hoc judgment about authority restriction not contested effect emerging CL objections is deficient practice and counter dispute mechanism PRC opposed to creation of mandatory mechanism hindering legal resolution make rules less effective scope of UNCLOS narrower China is involved resistant to norms UNCLOS problematic for CCP frustrates application of the China Sea recommendation to ratify UNCLOS China is in good standing UNCLOS intact even after disrespect for police like standing to criticize US measure not resonate with battle nation which perceive the US as violating. China is attempting to extort its expansive SES claims globally which captures ocean governance but US engagement resolves the Cardin AT Beijing now defined arbitration minimize issues on which UNCLOS is authoritative position to gain acceptance community effective ocean governance. China shape way states practice UNCLOS regionals acceptance creative precedent to evolve non-uniform practices fragmentation underway China's limited to region marketing its sea law case not fatal established precedent that corrosive and other suits the solution will wither enabled by legal environments lacks American enforcement of North China prime to externalize its approach on SES to other states otherwise SES work as nuclear clue 24 SES clarify Washington states other hostile China building military structure to push Navy out collision and clashes easily escalate US back ally risk of conflagration SES business waterways through trillion dollars passing through China cost off trade if China sees so could determine how determine nuclear umbrella as well Japan NATO and prudence crosshairs all alliances lose value during nuclear arms races and aggression all conflicts existential US would go to war method the standard is running exceeded it categorically outweighs death is global painful irreversible and for value more uncertainty means the risk right outweighs the risk raw no amount of suffering justifies universal not conceptual dead Grunwald but to extinction bad or any moral theory deontology thinks the extinction bad failed due to humanity due to those who work for a better future which capacity ever befallen humankind humans collective agents right solely make sense in a political community and everyone shares especially important extinction bad central planner try not to legislate laws that increase risk in human extinction render lives today pointless long-term goal projects rob existential threats are truly universal not moves to secure one is similar but he begins initiate process that may pitch survival all is necessary to treat universal cases scrutiny the power to kill life cell being think it should not be too hasty in concluding humanity wants to cheat or concerned about the future of one is theorists much directly adjust new forms of non-humanist universality that have risen alongside the manifestation of the apocalypse fiat is good position debaters and judges as budding social critics so position debaters anything more than a game Mickey 97 debaters should understand themselves as social critics in search of practical politics while few will ever hold a policy making position all grow up with criticism debate differs criticism debate is a game criticism is not restricted to official criticism it's a prerequisite to policies of society agent makes ignoring an impossibility one need not influence agenda to discuss what the US should do undergrads and judges are removed from deliberation inherency demands plans be utopian attitudes or structures incremental and radical distinction makes no difference debate for decades debaters used to be out or should to propose radical changes students start talking about policy it's not making policy reject root cause the international order is contingently constructed Wilhelm 90 there can be no universal order which has ontological primacy over all others global order just a group of things which human structure through specific political actions ordering of order can never be close to the possibility of closure in spite of human desire for ontological certainty is the possible impetus for gender theoretical and applied practice of global order explicitly linked to the radical contingency of being or the lack or void in any symbolic order will be able to come to terms with challenges of politics distinction responsibility contestation which will go beyond fixity. Okay, I'm good for cross-sex.
Cool. Right before cross-sex, I'm just gonna ask a few questions about the AF. The first would be, so we know obviously this debate is between, policy affirmative, traditional affirmative versus like critique. Given that, what type of things do you guys think Harris should be doing in cross-sex to establish the legitimacy of his K or whatever arguments he decides to read? Nate?
I mean, he could be asking questions about the defense of the AF's epistemology, XYZ, or he could be asking questions about whatever K he's reading, setting up link arguments. So is the ICC participatory in XYZ instances of colonialism, stuff like that, or whatever the AF is.
Yeah. James, do you want to maybe elaborate a little bit on what you mean by solidify the legitimacy of the link? Like what type of question do you think that could be aimed at, or what type of things should Harris aim for while doing so?
Um, I don't think you should directly give away what the K's running is, because then the affirmative can grasp an idea of what the K is going to be and start thinking about the 1AR should look like in regards to the 1AC. So it should be a setup question that directly gives you a link because cross is binding, and that makes it so they can't really contest the link, and also makes it so that they don't exactly know what the K is going to be, even though they have a general idea what it might be.
Yeah. Um, yeah, those are all good strategies. And I guess maybe the last thing, just so we can have a clear understanding before the questions and cross, does anyone kind of want to just explain the overall thesis of the affirmative, what the app is kind of saying in a most basic way, and basically what are Ohm's major toolboxes or tools in the toolbox? No one's responding. We can ask Albert. Albert, do you have any thoughts on that? I don't know if he's saying anything in chat, but okay. Well then I guess I can just quickly explain, or Ohm can interject if he wants to. But broadly speaking, the S argument is just that the US acceding to the UN, specifically in the law of the sea, would resolve, disputes over land or disputes between countries, specifically in the context of Russia. I mean, specifically in the context of the Arctic, and then with Russia, and then also China, the South China Sea. Cool. All right, with that, we can do start cross.
Okay. All right, I'm good.
Yeah.
Okay, my first question has to do with the method page. The McGee 97 card says the AF defends talking about public policy. I know that's different than making public policy. What's the difference, and why is talking about public policy good?
Yeah, sure. So first, your first question about talking about public policy, it's different to talk about solely the plan's consequences instead of like what the process of getting to that like consequence or that policy is. So we're talking about the consequences of the policy instead of saying how we would get Republicans or other people to agree with it. McGee says that is good because even if like the policy would never get passed, we can still realize that that policy would never get passed and make demands on the state so that we can get closer to that policy. So even if
Wait,
never,
okay, so
yeah.
you're starting with the starting point that the topic would never get passed. Then I guess what's the point? Like, do we get something out of talking about these discussions, or are we just talking about them for
Yeah,
fun?
so besides like obviously like being able to like play debate as a game, the education we get from talking about these policies is useful even if we'll never accede to UNCLOS because we can realize that the state is bad insofar as it's not acceding to UNCLOS. It's not being able to deter Russia and China and make demands on the state so that even if it might not accede to UNCLOS, we can still do things to deter Russia and China and
Okay.
become better in those regards.
Okay,
So
so let's talk
acknowledging the
about
app is
okay.
acknowledging that the state is bad.
Okay, sure. Let's talk about the first scenario. Why does the US joining UNCLOS make Russia want to stay within it?
Sure. So the primary reason why Russia is like planning on leaving is because it feels that its territorial claims over the Northern Sea Route are being ignored by the US. Joining means we have a seat at the table at both the UNCLOS and at the Arctic Council to communicate these disputes with
Okay,
them
wait.
and
What
come
what
up
is
with.
the Arctic Council?
So the Arctic Council is a separate legal organization. However, currently that isn't supposed to deal with territorial disputes. However, because we're not a part of UNCLOS, it's currently being forced to deal with all of those disputes. By joining UNCLOS, we make it so that the Arctic Council can like divest from focusing on those
Okay.
territorial disputes and instead focus on science-based cooperation,
What
which is
what prevents like the United States and Russia from cooperating independently of like an international organization? Like what is key about that?
Right. So that's because UNCLOS is the only legal body that has the ability to do things like grant exclusive economic zones, such as the Northern Sea Road, to certain countries. So it has granted Russia and the US certain claims, but Russia and the US don't recognize each other's claims because they're violating UNCLOS, right? So if the US exceeds to UNCLOS, Russia
Okay.
would also then, as a result, acknowledge our claims and
Okay,
like
sure.
not dispute us.
Okay, and then last thing, I want you to give me a scenario in which Russia might be prompted to use like nuclear weapons over these kinds of like small conflicts rather than like conventional non-nuclear weapons, given the fact
Yeah,
aware
sure.
of this the possibility of
So
like
clear evidence says specifically that Putin has raised the possibility of using nukes in the Arctic specifically because of how much he values the trade it brings and how much he values military bases in places like the Bering Sea, and because there are nuclear submarines that the US has in Norway, which would cause Russia to fear any skirmish would result in nuclear use.
Okay, sure. Okay. I'll send the one in C. Prateek, I can send it first, right?
Yeah, you're good. I'll ask some questions just after one and C cross.
Okay. The order is going to be one off critique. The order on the case, or sorry, yeah, and then the order on case is going to be the method page and then the advantage. I'll send it in the chat.
I think 2 people just joined here, so if you could resend it, that'd be great.
Oh, sure. I can give it like 30 more seconds for people to open up the doc. You good? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I'll start. Through the racialized ontological orderings of the settler, master, native, and slave, the Western man brings violence, destruction, nuclear violence, political self into being. Settler colonialism and slavery are investments in them remain necessary for everyday functioning of politics. Normal as far as 21. The European links climate change, slavery, the elimination of native peoples, and extraction of capitalism, all part of the same global ordering. The West brought up the human features in a hegemonic model of being human that initials egalitarian initiates the anthropocene in this racial schema, marking Indian as inevitably dead and deserving of death. The displacing created shock to geography, whereas life is systematically destroyed and transforming genocide from a behavioral off to a geographic one. The life itself is synonymous with death for those who are positioned in the antithesis of humanity. Death is normative is relied upon the fact that the must get left to itself. It is not the West, was a world which owes its existence to slavery and genocide. The desire for the Western model of living ensures that Eurocene is not only driven by political economy, but also by libidinal economy as well. Produced violence functions created by political ontology, which lack Native American people are seen as non-human political ontology. Names the power subjects lack the functions as if a metaphysical ecological terror and a lump to the continued imprisonment and blacks or murders of black and Native peoples. To see how long ontological structure can into the present, some legible solution, more pessimism into the world's already burning because the world's pleasures come from the slaving, killing of black Native people that order in favor of liberal ideas make reform. There's not enough time for such things that a liberal process make us more comfortable than they done anything about it. Nevertheless, if there is any hope left, it is in the complete destruction of this world and unclosed traps indigenous nations as being nations subjects of the state wherein they are not a party to the treaty and are therefore not allowed to contest eases created by the convention of subduing indigenous sovereignty and allowing native settled governments to control all the resources as well in 21. Indigenous rights of the sovereign states that are historically recognized by the state governments, the law of the sea convention impose arbitrary ocean through borders through eases the state that claim territorial sovereignty that unlike could claim absolute sovereignty over territorial seas that indigenous claims across the border of the eases and negotiations have to take power and the indigenous states recognize the sovereign powers right rather than between indigenous groups and two states that are during jurisdiction of indigenous claims land the marine states and resources and indigenous considered the subset of one state in this protection of the customer rights relies on indigenous negotiation that are not a sovereign party that makes them multilateral overlapping the jurisdiction mean that the rights of indigenous peoples are being contested on all levels all the time inclusion exclusion of the other groups will decision making would rely on the decision dominant sedation state and interstate structure woven by work interventions to seek disrupt the system of dominance to participate in the inclusion of the gender and indigenous groups do not halt the ongoing process and structures of colonialism and close rule with Congress and every affinitional link causes equal collapse. That's why 20 beneficiaries of the EEZs are imperialist powers, namely the U.S. which is white settler regimes massacring populations of refugees, fellow membership which is in opposition to China, the privatization shrink the global commons to keep with that immunological thinking over the within EEZs over overfishing collapse overlap is left tension among geopolitical face opposition. And I promote extraction, no license for now with comparative exploitation or environment profit requires cumulative exploitation. The alternative would be impartial priority. The body whose priority was limited to the exploitation of oceans that give retracting EEZs and organization in the commons privatization the CB on close as across the 2 degrees Celsius climate barrier. The future generations will not forgive us. And Trump flows unit organization effectiveness and U.S. international law credibility both class obviously does. Keith 24. The U.S. United organization bracing for Trump that helps limited funding within a cultural organization, human rights authority, the funding to AWTO, the United States, Vegas, all the United States being 20% of Trump's culture and complete reassessment. Trump will explain the a conservative agenda of Trump will let Paris had no interest in multilateralism and protection of international laws and treads. The Republicans are furious about the criticism of Israel policy and expect them to severe biggest credits to UN day-to-day work in the face of uncertainty. And the alternative is refusal. This is a gendered practice towards equality figures must be crushed away for the ass. General started harassing King 17. The gendered practice refusal on colonial oblige tradition making West turn upon itself colonial knowledge, making the colonial and meta-narrative the option research question the assumptions and expose the violent particularities of the meta-narrative refusal that express nature and actually remain through which use the genocide to annihilate native epistemology. When the United States is genocide itself exists, and the native people can exist human. The United States can no longer determine the condition of being human. The human initialities and look back and resistance as practice of a theory that determines shift identity. And our interpretation of the ways that the judge should value the app is not research everywhere. Most proven ethical rank. It's a hypothetical implementation. They get to it determining the app, which is the most predictable since every year. All your assumes validity will ever the strategy to rely on moving mass reports. The app like process can apply to theory and through their petition settlers and active history reproduce colonial subjects. Something is the only real impact on the landless 117. Settlers answer the charge of the lives predicated upon genocide. Settlers position on land is sustained through defensive posture. The to go on addition to analysis of the subject to settle colonialism can be subverting tax on the wholeness pursue restoring up to the mythology just occurs and iterative state checks. Repetitive practices of everyday life give subtleties their meaning in the case page. Starting on the method, Greenwald and Zoomer. One, it's not a question of if extinction is bad, but if you should orient all of our planning around minimizing it. Otherwise, any risk side constrains any action despite defense, because extinction will always that way. And we never get to talk about sort of smaller magnitude impacts like colonialism, which is a move to innocence. Two, there is no value to life under the Eurocene because the life in civil society becomes predicated upon the death of Black and Native people. McGee, fiat might be useful in some instances to orient action, but it should not trade off with a more important process of debate that informs its use, e.g. research practices and the conscious assumptions. We have to formulate the kinds of plans we advocate for in the first place. Then Wilhelm 19, the global order may not be closed, but it is structured through a massive historical inertia. Centuries of colonialism that continue today have limited what is capable within the political vision. Our framing is that we should be thinking about how to specifically break from these orders of events, and our answer is that we can only rupture that through the ontology rather than contributing to it. And the first scenario, unclosed norms fail, even if society requirements are set to no accountability. This Pedrozo 22, objective application would prevent excessive claims on unless underrated baseline preventions or abuse and illegal extended jurisdiction. Clear language. China around the Parcel Islands and Senegal Islands, Denmark on the Faroe Islands, France around the New Caledonia, Ecuador around the Galapagos Islands, the UK around the Falkland Islands. UN closes so literally the history of literally illegally drawing archipelago baselines affecting adversely freedom of navigation and lawful use of seas. And zero chance of Russian conflict. Empirics actually skip that card. No Russia war. They're halted at this wall. 24. Russia will be in their shape to launch new wars. Russia has lost 300,000 troops with thousands of vehicles, ships, and aircraft. Would welcome to order weak additional troops that weaken the economy for fueling of popular discontent. Sanctions and long-term consequences are so severe. Fighting is costly and input and Lipo and might be less satisfied. And Arctic disputes are stakeholder SPSEC. 24. The Russian want attention and stability. Our states have agreed to follow unclose. The only dispute involves Hans Island a little more than a year. 10 to 10 more negotiations amid these claims. Institutions unresolved disputes are highly unlikely to lead in the conflict, stability, and co-part needed for development. Our leading considerators we preserved a long time into contributing of recoup the disputes have been dealt with a peaceful and multilateral way. The cooperative approach will endure in the scenario too. China won't comply with international maritime law. They would just throw their hands up. They wouldn't just throw their hands up and end century-long plans of domination. Their ratification has no effect on Chinese incursion in SCS and no influence in unclosed, and it's not hypocritical. No impact to hypocrisy would aggravate the more that's Butch and such a 16. Unclosed would provide the no additional clues in addressing disputes. Representatives exercise independent reasoning for the not destruction. The presence of Americans would have a plated substitutions or hardliners who view the regional regimes that advancing U.S. interests are joining unclosed would prescribe fucking point of hypocrisy. There's no reason to believe that Russia was submitted to China. Beijing would submit to authority. Beijing has made a calculated that defending the self-sovereignty. The SCS would always reputational image. Nothing is critical about calling members, but the commitment with the U.S. is in a much better position than China. The verification only results from simplification rhetoric and a change of policy. But Beijing has so determination joining unclosed would not have a tangible impact in China. Wouldn't actually their evidence. Skip Groves 22. Their evidence agrees with us. It says that China is aggressing. They can absolutely despise international law, which is a structured issue they can't solve. That's clue 24. The aggression in the Chelsea Sea is coming to China. China respected any international law. Therefore, it wouldn't be in there in the first place. And no U.S.-China war. One, escalation is again China's grand strategy, and both sides prioritize the escalation. That's China, or that's Zoo 23. China is not ready for war. They're well-coordinated attack and facing a amount of domestic problems. G will likely focus on domestic issues, especially the pandemic, economic areas, and multiplier action would destroy G's. The China dream is lifelong presidency and domestic action. China's global ambitions. China has understood the conflict between China and the U.S. as a global disaster. China implement their first use nuclear policy, peace resolution disputes, and the first choice for both sides. China and the U.S. Well, should have to make the diplomatic measures with any cost. China has fields with their American allies, including Japan, Australia, and South Korea. China will gain less but lose more than a great power for competition. China lose isolation. The top priority for China's foreign policy and to no South China conflict. Semiconductors. That's for number 23. The Chinese troops have faced a shooting since 1979. The risk of a Chinese invasion against Taiwan really low. The China's latest for military threatening. G as a peacemaker hopes to use China as a mediator. Follows visit the Iran Saudi agreed on a Chinese mediation. Unlikely to reverse the molecular victory assembling into war. The Putin has demonstrated how unpredictable cost and humiliating war can be. Gender sense. There's utterly real. Cut the card at real.
All right. Quickly, just before we get into 1NC cross-ex, let's just talk about the 1NC strategy and what Ohm should really be, be pinning Harris down to in cross-ex, or just clarifying. Out of everything here, what do you guys think is the most important thing that Ohm should just be like clarifying across, or maybe just asking about, or generally what is the strategy Ohm should be taking in this cross-ex? Does anyone have immediate thoughts about that? Lily, do you want to explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. Like the K is
I think your mic is a little bit muffled, or I can't hear you though.
Wait, sorry. The
Okay.
K is like low-key short. It's like 3 cards, which means like a very viable 2NR is just like case turns and stuff on case. And like the like 1AR basically it like from what I understand it has to do 2 things. It has to basically beat the framing on the K because past that the actual links on the K probably don't solve case. And then but then it has all of the stuff on case to deal with. I think like the extinction stuff about like extinction reps are bad are mainly theoretically justified. So I think he pretty much just needs to beat that and beat the stuff on case, and he can probably beat the K with weighing.
Yeah, that makes sense. In terms of, I guess, Harley, do you want to explain what you mean by, or at least like maybe for people who don't know where you're coming from, what would be strategic and re-clarifying what refusal does?
Like, if refusal does nothing, then
I don't, I think your mic is also, unless it's just me, but I think the mic is a little bit far away, maybe. Oh, okay. You can just, if you want to type it in chat, you can also do that.
Prateek, there's like a pinging going on in your background, so I don't know what that is, but
Wait, I don't hear it. It might be your like background or
okay.
Okay.
yeah, I don't hear it.
Yeah, so Harley said if refusal does nothing, then voting for the neg does nothing as well. Yeah, that is potentially also true. And one thing I'll just add also for people is when you're dealing with critiques, especially in the context of a policy affirmative versus a critique, the alternative can be leveraged in ways that are unexpected at first. For example, the 2NR can make the argument that the alternative would actually result in a world in which UNCLOS would be adopted just in a particularly different way. Or the 2NR can advocate for the fact that refusal would resolve impacts like Russia war, China war. And so if Ohm were to, understand more what the alternative does in cross-sex, he can deal with it more specifically in the 1AR. Cool. All right, with that in mind, we can, go ahead and start cross.
All right, Harris, you're good. Yeah. Okay. The alt, is it a pick / can it result in the AF? No, it's not a pick. Okay. So if it's not a pick, then what does refusal look like materially? Well, I think asking materially at the end of that question kind of obscures the rest of the critique. We've made massive arguments about why scholarship is more important than just like material implications of fiat. So I think I would have to answer your question through that lens first, and then I can sort of start to explain what the alternative could look like materially. If you want to rephrase. Yeah, sure. Could you answer that? Like what would first explain what it would look like in terms of research practices, and then after that what it might look like materially. Yeah, so King says first we have to sort of make a refusal of Western sort of models of research that entails thinking through things like reliance on international law, Western models that she would say are inherently white, like the state, for example. So a refusal of orienting our research around those actors and those methods. And only then can we begin to plan sort of more specific actions that King would also endorse, things like decolonization by embracing tactics of Black and brown activists that have been sort of prevalent throughout the past several hundred years in the United States as resistance to slavery, colonialism, things like that. Okay, sure. Is this refusal and this change in scholarship in the way we view politics, is that something done only in the United States, or is it done globally in other places that are doing colonialism like Russia or China? I think settler colonialism, the Eurocene, is an inherently international thing. It is applied differently in different places. There are instances of Russia colonizing people in Siberia and submitting them to a form of settler colonial dominance. I think there's no good reason for the alternative to not apply to those people as well. Okay. I want to talk about then the links. So the first one, the first one, the Wilson link, can you explain the EEZs? Why do they harm indigenous people's sovereignty? Well, explicitly, the argument under how the EEZs function under UNCLOS is that they are given to the roles of nation states. And so under mediations that occur between, like under UNCLOS between nation states, under different territorial disputes, Native people are not included under those, which is kind of at least one example of a demonstration of how like Native sovereignty is completely disregarded because they literally have no capacity to sort of petition for their rights under these treaties. But also because EEZs oftentimes are a tool for things like economic exploitation, which is what the next card sort of opens up into.
Okay, sure. I want to talk about the Henderson card. Why does the K, like, we've obviously do research and like there are other academic spaces outside of debate. Why does the K specifically disrupt our subjectivity and settlerism in academic spaces?
Right. Well, so how Henderson thinks about subjectivity is that it is sort of constantly produced through smooth spaces in which we kind of assume settler colonialism to be common sense. So we take certain things to be common sense. That means like any time we break that repetition, it is something that is meaningful, especially in high school debate, which is like only one of the few like communities in which we get to talk about these things. You're not talking like the average like A push class in like high school isn't like teaching you the intricacies of like settler colonialism, like and how that relates to like complex things like international law. This is a heavily unique forum. We think that is good to forward these
Okay.
conversations in.
I'll start taking some prep. Okay, that was 2 minutes. Prateek, you wanna do, or wait, we're doing the questions before the 1 hour, right?
Yeah, I can just follow up a little bit. I mean, I don't think too much should be changed, but
Okay.
we can just ask, I guess, because I didn't talk about more your strategy. I kind of talked about just questions with the 1NC. More broadly, I guess, what do you guys think is the best strategy for this 1AR? If someone wants to describe the moves that Ohm should make, and how he should do that. Nate, you have a thought?
I think this 1AR should read like a different framework interpretation, whether they'll be like weigh the case, plan, focus. So we can determine what offense matters under the affs interpretation, just unlike the negatives, which is purely representational, which means that they can weigh the case. So extinction level threats versus like representation or in-round procedures, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. I guess let's not, I don't want to talk too much about different things because we'll just see what Ohm does and we can talk about that after. So Ohm, you can go ahead and start the 1AR whenever you're ready.
Yeah, just put the doc in the Zoom. I'll wait for it.
Oh, okay, wait. I just admit, just let one person join. So yeah, and Ethan and Lily definitely agree with that stuff as well. I'll put the 1AC and 1NC docs again in for anyone who's just joining. 1AR doc is the one that Ohm sent.
Yeah. And for an order, it's just going to be like the advantage, the method, and then the K. Okay, Harris and everybody else, are you good? Okay, that's great. Okay. U.S. non-ratification causes Russia to leave UNCLOS to deviate of Western hypocrisy, which enables it to escalate in the Arctic. That goes nuclear, DDBMD bases, and military presence in the area, escalating even small skirmishes. 1:1, Pedrosa is wrong. Other countries' violations are minimal so far, and Russia is specifically not one of the violators listed. 1:2, yes, Russia war. Baker says post-Ukraine, they're particularly vulnerable and feel uneasy about cooperating. Their evidence says to seem how even fears of land loss cause Putin to feel encircled in the area. 1:3, Walt is about lack of new military capacity in Ukraine, but Russia already has troops and bases in the Arctic with which it can attack. 1:4, Vlodchek says the recent states have not escalated is because all these states have agreed to follow the rules laid down in UNCLOS, but Russia won't listen out. As per 1:C, Belushi, negotiations fail in the status quo because we don't have a seat at the table. Conceding no U.S.-China war, there's no offense here. The method page, extinction outweighs it is categorically the worst evil since it prevents everyone from pursuing any of their future goals. It is a non-consensual debt that they shouldn't adapt 7 billion people to, and it isn't wide futurity because of the case. Think true, that's Grunwald and Zimmer. Their first response is wrong. We should center it, minimizing it when there are real threats, i.e. Russian invasion happening, and can predict whether or not the other ones matter or are likely. The second response is wrong because we'll answer our ontology, and they still shouldn't condemn those who find some value in the year seen to death. Fiat is good, its utopian nature means that we should recognize that the state is bad because it hasn't exceeded UNCLOS and then make demands on it to improve, which also enables us to do iterative, in-depth research about the state. Ignoring the state is impossible because the wording of the topic forces debates about the United States actions. The trade-off argument is wrong. Debate is the only competitive research activity where we have the ability to iterate over state-based decisions. Other forms of research are accessible outside of round. There is no one global order. It was created and is currently being shaped by human actions, which are always changing. That's Wilhelm. Their argument about colonialism is wrong. Settler colonialism cannot explain conflicts between Dalits and Brahmins, or why Iraq and Iran must fight with each other. So analyzing from specific policy perspectives is best. The K framework, weigh the F against the K. Anything else moves 6 minutes of the 1AC's offense, which forces a 1-year restart, make a debate structurally neg bias. It's most logical. We justify the F based on its consequences. Their interp is not more fair. It's incoherent to weigh the framing of the F versus material links and link terms. We can leverage case versus process counterparts through deficits and go for reasonability and defense versus theory. Henderson is wrong because psychoanalysis is garbage, which means ontology is false, which turns to K because it permanently cements native suffering. But in psycho persistent pop culture, psychology of those who not bother children psychology, not do research, experiment not include control and placebo. 110 years psychoanalysts not set up a single lab, not submit to journal of pseudoscience, capacity so big by fruits admission or irrefutable, a dipset complex, a myth psychoanalysis, not perform trials will follow pseudoscience, will unattestable yet regarded as unstable result of dogmatism. No subjectivity should we feel spend far more time researching for school work or exams than debate, switching sides and competition means we'll read the best arguments, not the truest ones, freedom by spark, wipe out China war good, excite out winning rounds. Ontological differences ignore nuanced struggles that strategically repurpose settler categories. There was no 19 ontological structure ignore struggles and debate. Industry people use modern notions rather than injecting as irreconcilable generic conclusion for global issues pushes abstraction further from advocacy. This has consequences for colonial struggles and generic arc about relational ontology make variety demands that struggles and tension commensable with lack of engagement with practice related to what knowledge is produced and valid abstract generic and applicable beyond context. It's also distributed by increasing quality of life in natives are reservation to things like the shutting down the Keystone Pipeline, improving access to clean water, or further tribal sovereignty rights. The EEZ link is inevitable. China, Russia, etc. all profit from and use EEZs. It's just a question of whether or not the US can get a seat at the table. Skip the card for now. Wilson says it's imperfect now because it doesn't recognize indigenous sovereignty, which is something that can be improved over time as the US modifies the UNCLOS or has discussions in it. Van Eyck says that the environment is costing, but it advocates for a separate regional body to solve, which all doesn't fiat. Also, they didn't read the terminals to environment collapse. Trump doesn't kill solvency. Durable fiat means we at least get continue remaining part of UNCLOS, which requires that it remains existing, and the all shreds Afghan and makes debates about rollback instead of policies. The all perm do both double bind, either the perm shields the links, or the all can overcome the status quo. The perm is best. Russia expands it to sovereign nations now, such as the Inuit territory in the Arctic, which removes their citizens' ability to have sovereignty, which is what the K criticizes. Even if the perm links to somewhat of their links, the net benefit of encouragement massively outweighs. Sudden movements further colonialism. Cult 14 gunners are white reactionary men co-opted and bred with racism, guns and power, warlords, freedom fighters, fantasies about arms struggle, or half-baked leftists who have not kicked out foreign occupiers that fight among settler colonies for political authority. Go back up. Deep sea mining is better than any alternative. Podcast 20 large amount for metals for renewable tech, producing most from seafloor, significant advantages over land across every category. Landers, wildlife extinction, place gigaton, bird on carbon reduction, mean disruption for social displacement, freshwater usage. I marked the Holocaust card at freshwater usage, read everything else.
Got it. 4 minutes prep starting. Okay. That's prep. The order is going to be the critique in the order of the 1AR. And then the case page starting on the method and then the advantage. Prateek, are you going to do a little bit of speech before this?
Yeah. Cool. So before Harris, starts his tuner, what parts, I guess, of the 1AR should he make sure to like definitely hone in on, focus on, and like not, concede? Ethan, do you want to kind of explain that for maybe some other people who might not understand the
I'll be
bigger
right back.
implications of framework?
Like, wait, actually, my bad. I think Harris is going to go for link and framework. I don't think he's going to go for the disat and kind of plan because answered the material links really well. I think he's going for his framework interp, and winning a link means exclude for being racist or exclude the plan.
Okay. Quickly, just to follow up on that, when you say the counterplan and the disad, for people who might not understand what that would mean in this context, could you just quickly explain that?
So there's material links to why like settlerism would lead to ecocide. I'm pretty sure in the 1EC doc. The alternative would solve both the uniqueness question of the app and the links. So he could go for it functionally as a link as a disad and the alternative that solves. Or he could go for winning a link and framework that moots the 1EC.
Cool. Yeah.
Bingo.
That's covered in the rest. Lily, do you want to quickly explain, I guess, maybe what are some weaknesses you think the 1AR had then, given that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, like low-key borderline perfect 1AR, but like the easy thing, I think that it's undercovered because the only like response is that it's like non-unique, which I think doesn't, I guess, fully answer why like ratifying a new treaty that would legitimize settler colonialism is bad because okay, and I think like it functions as like a disad to the plan like materially, but also a reason that the 1AC like relies on like settler colonialist like views and like what Juarez calls like the Eurocene. So I think you could go like I think it could be gone for like materially as like a structural violency disad to case and also just as a link to the critique.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so basically, two sides of it, 1, 2, and R basically here could be going for framework, just saying the affirmative was bad on an educational level and you should reject the research project at the F. And on the other hand, Harris could say, the affirmative would lead to bad things. Those things would be worse than the affirmative, and then the critique would solve. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Given that, let's just listen to Harris's UNR and then we can see from there.
All right. Before I start, I just want to say there's going to be like a lot of moving pieces because, like for example, just try to like look out for how framework is justified specifically and how it's justified in different places of the debate and how like, for example, the link interacts with framework and how, like the case page interacts with the link, because all of those things are super important and you don't want to miss those interactions out because those are just cross apps that if you don't mention in the 2AR, they could harm you. All right. This is a debate about debate. Anti-blackness and colonialism are epistemic products that are furthered in this round in ways beyond the plan, and thus the confines of decision must be expanded beyond fiat to first consider the larger unconscious assumptions that the affirmative research product relies on. Otherwise, fundamental questions go unanswered. Is liberalism just, or should our worldviews be centered around the actions of the nation state? Your ballot is decided on who shapes more ethical subjectivities in response to the political climate of the Eurocene. The line for proper. We'll start on the pragmatic questions. A, you get to weigh the research of the affirmative, proven by the fact that the 1AC had a massive method section in the bottom, which means it's fair. B, weighability is solved by resolving research models comparison because all your advocacies only stem from what research models you adopt first. Now they answered Psycho, not Henderson. I'll explain Henderson and then answer Psycho. Colonialism functions through the iteration of smooth spaces in which settler subjects consciously relay colonial logics and assumptions, then making them appear as common sense. These patterns can only be broken by questioning the performance of the 1AC, which means that every time we disrupt settler colonialism is uniquely good, even if it can happen in other places. Now, psychoanalysis is a heuristic to explain the world. They have not provided a counter explanation for violence, so you default negative. Independently, we are actually, yeah, that's we'll do more on the ontology page later. The next argument, debate is unique in that high schoolers get to dive deep into critical literature. Competition proves you need to debate more ethically if you are so willing to disavow your positions. Now, the ontology debate proper. Juarez, the political ontology of the world is structured through political and libidinal investments into the Eurocene, which Black and Native life is marked through antagonism to the Western human. The desire to civilize a world reliant on Black labor and devoid of Indigenous people to drive agents and broader decision-making, making as the only reliable explanation for centuries of a continuous geographic destruction of land, gratuitous violence towards Indigenous women and Black children, and libidinal violence into investments into the products of erasure. Now, the Lemon proper one ontology, raised quality of life is always double-sided. We get something, we lose something. Hierarchy just reinvents itself, which is why Trump is going to pollute way more than the Keystone Pipeline ever would have. Decolonization is definitely nuanced, but in a 45-minute debate, there are limitations. This is obviously defense. Now, the next argument, this implicates why the affirmative has zero offense under our model and proves why framework is important. Their education is incapable of escaping the global order and therefore reproduces it because they have, by sort of shifting over sort of barriers like attitudes and politics within fiat, there is no way as to how their form of politics is capable of escaping the nuanced structure that ontology has produced. Even if you don't believe the world is structured in a specific way, it definitely is influenced by hundreds of years of structures of slavery and colonialism that continue today. You have to have nuanced responses to that history. The linked debate proper A, it's not inevitable in the world of the alternative, which would abolish major players and unclose, therefore reducing EZZs because of decolonization. B, deep sea mining does not resolve questions of sovereignty. Who is in control of the resources and how are they used? C, given ontology and historical patterns, there is no evidence to have faith in improvement over time, absent evidence of the alternative. Now, I'll go for the Van Eyck link. It's going to turn the affirmative. UNCLOS affirms environmental destruction of the sea, demarked in EEZs, enabling overfishing and mass pollution that causes climate change. That turns case. When I see Claire concedes the ills of climate change have a negative impact on Russian resources because and enable NATO countries to infiltrate the region because these are more easily accessible. That makes conflict and miscalculation significantly more likely and makes war inevitable under the world of the affirmative. And the sort of D point. We don't need this kind of solvency, but even if it's something that is possible as a cooperation under decolonization, we'll concede durable fiat, but it proves ontology is a reason why their education is bunk, because the affirmative could never happen in real life. You are making impossible demands and they are not productive because they are impossible. However, Black and Native activism has continued for the past 300 years, and affirming it is something that has been able to produce good gains. Now the alternative proper, I'll extend it. It's refusal. That entails understanding the affirmative's politics, the psychic investments into the Eurocene, and then using this round to make cracks in those investments. Like Henderson, we endorse the positive reorientation of politics and scholarship focused on abolition and decolonization to dismantle the violence that categorizes current world. For example, Native people defending waters from energy companies is an example of how our alternative would do things like resolve the links. Now the links are disattached to the perm, but the line proper, a perm double bind is infinitely regressive. There's always one more thing you could do before the alternative. That doesn't mean it's good. The B and C point, native defense solves. Absent U.S. aggression, it'll be even easier. Absent U.S. aggression, it'll be even easier. The decolonization going to take in international in places like Russia as well, given the fact that they are also implicated in colonialism and the Eurocene. But also native groups have been defending themselves for centuries, which is why the Lakota people have not lost a battle for have not been defeated by the United States Army ever, which demonstrates there is a significant form of military capability, and underestimating that is a form of settler colonialism that is inherently paternalistic. The affirmative page proper will do the extinction page. Extinction is another reason why their model of debate is incoherent and why research weighing is preferable. One, the threats are always created in debate, which is why there have been a gajillion different affirmatives, and under every single topic, there's always a extinction threat that never actually happens, which means that extinction is always going to be proliferated in the debate space, which is always going to outweigh on magnitude risks of colonialism. We never get to talk about settler colonialism traditionally under their impact calculus, which is the reason that's why it has to be rejected. But two, if we win ontology, there is no value to life, even if some individuals experience a pleasurable life. That is not our argument. Our argument is that axiologically life is predicated on death. The life of the global north and life of whiteness becomes predicated upon the extraction and slavery in every other part of the colonized world, which therefore means that it is not something that we should reproduce. Their defense of fiat is silly. We can just co-opt competition and use it in the purpose of our education. It is good. Explanatory power is useless. Remind me why I need to explain Iran and Iraq when I can explain actors like the U.S. Now the case page on defense, there's a double line of sorts. Either one, Putin is unwilling to go to war because of unpopularity because of Ukraine. He knows that his entire country is going broke. He is not going to be able to afford a war or sustain popularity within it, so he wouldn't want to go to war. Or two, his motivations are strong enough to overcome his entire country hating him such that they would also overcome a form of law that has no terminal impact of violation different than the status quo within the U.S. And we turn case. Look, one is the evidence says, Boulez evidence says there is low intensity warfare is what Russia is doing in the Arctic. That seems to be contrary to sending out nukes, knowing that would destroy Putin's entire political career. and cause the global war. The impact is super small. Even if we lose framework, our impact definitely outweighs because it's indigenous distraction that has been, or dispossession that's been going on for hundreds of years. Okay, I'll take 2 minutes of prep. And Prateek, you can take over the questions.
Yeah, do you care if I wait until do you care if I ask questions during your prep?
No,
or-
no, it's fine. I'll just keep you muted or like mute.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, sounds good. All right. Just simple questions quickly. What do you guys think? Yeah, the recording is going to be sent out. What do you guys think the like best and possibly worst parts of Harris's 2 hours? Maybe what did he undercover? What did he overcover? What could he have done better, or did he do everything as you guys might have expected? Ask Flynn. Do you have any thoughts? Nate, any thoughts?
I thought it was, pretty good. I like the links turn case analysis. I think Jackson White probably has something to say though.
Yeah, I agree. I think Jackson Light was wasting.
Okay, Jackson, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think the explanation of the AF didn't provide a counter method for understanding violence means that you default neg on ontological understandings of native violence was good analysis. Also, I agree with Nate that link turns case war inevitable under the Eurocene made sense.
Cool. Given that, what should the 2AR be doing? What if to possibly win, to close out some loose tie up some loose ends, whatever it may be. What should the 2AR be looking out for and doing?
I think the 2AR should be worried about that links turns case analysis, especially given the 1AR framework interp of way the case means that it'll have to mitigate some risk of, or apply some risk of defense and risk of AF offense outweighing. And then I guess framework explanations.
Yeah.
Okay. My prep's over. Are you done with questions, or I can just wait?
Yeah, that's good. That's good for now.
Okay, sure. Order is gonna be like the advantage, the method page, and then the K. Okay. Okay. Here's your good, or like everybody good. Okay, sounds great. The only answer to case was impact defense, which makes it a pretty clear AF. Russian aggression in the Arctic is uniquely likely now. Putin is willing to risk his political career for this because he doesn't know the purpose of U.S. territorial expansion, like our claiming of the extended continental shelves for fears that we'd be willing to invade Russia next. The Ukraine argument / wasting resources in Ukraine is wrong. The winner said that Russia already has bases, military presence, and bombers in the Arctic regions. They could be easily maneuvered for the purposes of striking against the United States. The public popularity stuff is also irrelevant, proved by how every coup against Putin has failed, and then he's done things like lock up or kill his opponents like Navalny. The AF solves it gives the US a seat at the table, which enables us to resolve these disputes and cooperate with Russia, which is sufficient to solve. Now, the method page. Existential threats are truly universal. The Grunwald card says they should not condemn everybody, and the Zimmer card says you should not be hasty in condemning everybody to death just because there's violence that exists in the size code. Their 2 responses were bad. The first one was about how every AF has had an existential threat in the past. That's true for every AF. Even soft left AFs about preventing things like racism are not good to pass. But the McGee evidence says that is good because it forces us to make demands on the state and acknowledge that the state is bad, and then force the state and make demands on it to resolve those disputes in the future. Either way, we're going to do fairness weighing later, which should filter this out. The next argument about valid to life is wrong will beat ontology, and regardless of that, they shouldn't condemn all 7 billion people, some of whom do find value in the Eurocene, to death, and which is obviously the most ontological form of evil because people are not able to survive and find their own value to life afterwards. Now, the Curry proper, you should let me with the case against the K. They have dropped our logic argument that it's most logical. Our representations
are tied to consequences, which means it's illogical to separate the two. They have dropped that if their model debate forces a one-air restart, severs our representations from their justification, which makes it impossible to justify them. This is a defense of our research, which means even if you reject our framework term, you can still vote AF because the plan is a good idea, which justifies our research. Now, the only tool in our offense here was Henderson. First, psychoanalysis is false. It's pop culture psychology done by researchers who don't set up labs, don't have control groups, use vague hypotheses, and don't do follow-up studies. Every result is tautological, so you should reject it. That's Bud and Budge. It does take out Henderson because the underlying parts are about cellular drives, which means it's obviously in the context of psychoanalysis. The other argument they made was need to be ethical about our decisions. They have dropped the competitive incentives means we'll read the best arguments like Spark, Wipeout, China War Good, etc., which means that there's no incentive for us to read the most ethical arguments in debate, regardless of either framework or term, which means there's only risk of our fairness and logic offense. Now, I'll answer ontology here. It's false. Indigenous people have used modern conceptions of citizenship, modernity, and state-based politics to prove their own lives rather than refusing. Occasionally, claims about ontologies are generic and prevent viewing the uniqueness of different demands and struggles that exist in tension with each other independently. Ontology itself is a vague, abstract, and unapplicable form of knowledge production that hinders the colonial struggle. That's rose now. It is offense against ontology because it proves why it's a bad heuristic, and instead we should understand the world through specific nuanced policymaking angles, which answers their explanation of Juarez, because we've proven how there's different indigenous demands, and the only way to unify those demands is to prevent Russian aggression, which not only causes extinction, but also harms people like the Inuit people who live in the Arctic. Look, they functionally drop case, only have mitigatory impact defense. They do not do enough analysis on framework, and they've dropped our logic standard, which means a risk of a dropped case should outweigh.
Good debate, guys. For everyone, who's flowing and watching, we should take some time. Let's just say like about until maybe 7:10, 7:13, something like that, 5-8 minutes. And just try to create an RFD. I think do you have a doc you said or a link for that?
Oh, the form. Oh, shoot. How about everybody type their thing up? I'll just quickly create the form where you can submit it, but like type in the meantime.
Yeah, just maybe open a Google Doc or something like that, or anywhere you want to type, and just type the RFD up, and then we'll wait a couple minutes, and then we can share.
Prateek, we only need like 2 questions, right? Just like who won and what the RFD was, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. Let me send the link then. Okay. Here's the link.
Yeah, okay, so whenever you guys are done, just fill out that sheet, and then we'll go over what the results were. You have access to the results, right?
Yeah. Guys, make sure to type in correct RFDs. I just saw a response that was just like the word listed like 30 times, so try to avoid doing that. And like even if you aren't sure, make sure to at least type down your thoughts so we can like discuss them.
Yeah, it's always good to just make a decision and force yourself to, even if you have no idea why you're doing it. So honestly, even if you can't think and you have no reason, don't try to rationalize it. Just go with your intuition, and then we can see, where your intuition led you. Okay, do we have like enough results at this point or no?
Yeah, I think we have 13, which seems to be about the number of people we have here.
Um, yeah, I think maybe a couple people still have to submit, maybe because we have like 20 something. But
Oh, yeah, yeah. So everybody just try to submit within the next like 1 or 2 minutes, and then we can start talking about the round. Okay, looks like we have 16. I think that's just about everybody. Should we start with that then?
Yeah, I think that should be good enough.
Okay. Prateek, you want to do it or?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, I don't have the results though.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'll just like read out the results then. Okay, so with 16 responses, wait, I don't know how to do percents. The decision was a 11-5 for the neg. Okay. So I guess like I don't know who's that, but most people's RFDs for the neg seem to be that either first the link turns case and there was no defense on the link, which means that Russia continues escalating because there's like climate change, and the 2NR said that the AF evidence says that the primary reason Russia escalates is because of climate change. Or second is that the neg is winning something like ontology, and that means that the AF doesn't get to weigh the case, and even if it does, things like extinction reps and the representations of like progress that the AF has done are bad, which means regardless of the link, you can still vote neg, which seemed to be what most people's neg RFDs were. So either the neg just won framework, or most people just said the AF either like it didn't matter because the K turns case.
For people who voted F, not to like single you out or anything, it doesn't matter if you voted F, like at all. Like it's not a bad thing, but if someone wants to just explain their logic maybe so that way we can understand, and then people who are neg can go after that. So if one person who just, voted F wants to kind of explain what they were thinking, that'd be pretty good. So that we can just use that as a base to kind of talk about the round. I don't know who affirmed, so I can't really.
Yeah, I don't know who affirmed either. I think the results are like the type things. If somebody who voted AF can put it in chat or like say what their RFD was, that would be great, just so we can hear and discuss some like opposing views. Thank you for your contribution, Jackson. Let me just scroll through the RFDs. Okay, I don't think I see any like RFDs that aren't like just like the like joke ones that are like seems to say vote AF. So I guess we can just discuss like you want to just take it from here, Prateek, and talk about like the round.
Yeah. You guys can also obviously chime in because you guys were the ones debating, but generally I think the attractiveness of voting neg in this debate is that, like we were talking about earlier, the affirmative sets up a model of debate from the 1AR that says that as a judge, you should vote for the side that demonstrates that their side of the resolution would be most beneficial or is most good, right? And in this case, good is qualified by the outcomes of the resolution. The negative in the start of the 1 and C all the way into the 2NR obviously says that, instead we should look through debate as a lens of research, and we should condemn bad research practices. So research practices that are in this case settler colonial. The thing is though, the 2AR in this debate concedes to the fact that the negative, which the negative says in the 2NR, that doing the affirmative invests into a settler system. That settler system basically causes the impacts that the affirmative is saying, but worse. And the only way to actually prevent the impacts of the affirmative claiming is to do the alternative, deconstruct the systems that cause those impacts in the first place. And so in practice, basically what this means is that countries like Russia and China won't stop being fueling wars, causing land skirmishes, etc., if we don't first decolonize education and decolonize the ways in which we think about relationships. And so because the 2AR basically concedes to that, even if framework is correct, even if you should evaluate the consequences of the resolution, the consequences of the resolution would actually be worse than actually doing the negative. And that is a typical logic here for the, neg RFD. If someone has a question about that, please, ask, and either three of us, anyone can answer that. If someone actually disagrees with that RFD, you should also definitely voice your opinion so we can talk about it.
Okay, I don't think there's much like anybody has any questions. So I guess like just some things to take away from this round. First is that you should obviously answer a lot of these like K trick arguments, like Linktern's case, Alt-Sol's case. I think the lecture that we had a few days ago might have gone over this, but those should always like be at the top of your mind, even when you're like going for something like framework and you're going for like WADAF or like plan focus. So you still have to answer those like arguments so that you still get access to your app. Second is that well, yeah, so that's the main thing I would take away from this round. Second is that like the two-error needs to like condense and like go for one angle instead of going for multiple things like extinction outweighs the like a link turn or something like that. And so that way you avoid doing things like dropping arguments and like maybe mishandling something that the judge can vote on. So those are two of the takeaways I would take away from this round. If you're AF, if you're Harris, do you have anything to add from like the next side?
I think one of the big things I think I tried to do in this debate was develop answers to like the method cards earlier in the 1C. You can kind of identify a lot of the core controversies in the debate based on what the 1AC puts in their method section. Things like, does extinction outweigh? Is fiat good? Were the two big ones in this debate. So starting those debate early on the 1C gives you a lot of more time in the 2NR because you're not pressured to explain your entire argument just like in one instance. And then I think another thing about the 2NR is that um, it wasn't like I said before, the 2NR is that there's like very like if you think about it on paper, there's like kind of very simple structure. It's like I went for framework, which means the app doesn't get to weigh case. The neg link therefore outweighs. If I do win framework, or if I don't win framework, the link turns case. And like those are the two arguments really to pass the ballot. But I like had many justifications for them throughout the debate. So like the alternative and answers to the alternative about like paternalism became like something to do with like the link and ontology, or like the extinction debate. Even though I wasn't going for like an extinction reps link, I made that an argument about like their model and how their model is flawed. And then yeah, like different examples of that throughout the round. Like the Trump argument about like, yeah, I'll concede durable fiat is whatever good, but that is a disadd to your model of how fiat operates. Um, so kind of like using like these tricks to justify your arguments throughout the flow. That way, it's much harder for the two-layer to kind of isolate. I want to answer framework. They have to answer it on like three different parts of the K, like the alt, the link, and the framework page. It makes it significantly harder, and it kind of forces them to really go for one thing really well, so they can't have multiple routes to the ballot.
Yeah. I just got a question in chat asking if the negative is basically saying decolonization first is necessary. Harris, do you want to answer that question?
That wasn't. I would say that's probably something true about the critique. I don't think it was a massive part about this debate. If the 2NR or 2-layer went for some kind of unique perm about the link turn of the AF, why like maybe international agreements are uniquely key to facilitate and foster decolonization. Maybe on this topic, there's something to say about that, given the fact that the United Nations had a big role to play in decolonization in the 1960s and 50s and 70s and so on. But that I wouldn't say that's a big part of the debate, but it's definitely something that is important to understand, and that the critique has to have some kind of explanation for why decolonization is good and has to come first. Usually, that comes with kind of there in the form of the argument in terms of the negative. That's like we've had way too many things that have sort of said decolonization was a second step, and that we had other things that were going to put themselves first. Like we have to do one more thing before we decolonize, like have sort of like a little bit more, funding for reservations, and then we can focus on these other goals. And the argument is that we have waited too long for decolonization. We have to forefront it now. It's kind of a time frame issue that, yeah, that's how I like to think about it.
I have a question.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, do you think it's more strategic to go for decol or rejection?
I think those two are the same thing. I think, well, I think generally like any author who like rejection is like who's writing about rejection, in this case it's King, is usually like implicitly saying decolonization is good and has like a robust defense of decolonization. But I think if you want to have like multiple doors, so say for example the 2AR wins framework, then it's really like then the alt just loses because you don't do anything. There's no consequences. Then it's just the AF versus the status quo, unless you have like a turn to the case. Having like decolonization as like a secondary switch that you can turn on, it's like an if-then situation. So it's like if I win like the scholarship debate, then you can vote on refusal. If I don't and you need something more material, then you can also vote on decolonization, which has like a lot of good net benefits for things like alt solves case or like resolving the links is super important as well, depending on
Yeah.
what your links are.
In some and like from like a more like I guess from my perspective, also for like reading Phil and stuff, the way I kind of just think about refusal versus decall is that refusal functions almost as like impact uniqueness to like rejecting unethical practices, right? Basically, like the card just explains, and like the way it's used is that like the typical objection would just like objection to like framework or like the a solution of that framework proposes, right? Will be like, well, obviously, like rejecting what people think is like slightly settler in debate is not going to do anything. People just read the same arguments, nobody cares, whatever. Refusal kind of acts like a impact filter for that and says that like we have like a unique reason to like refuse these unethical settler practices. Otherwise, XYZ. And then decall takes that a step further, and then says that like we should actually decall whatever, and then you can weigh that against like the absent impacts and whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with what Prateek said. I think when it comes to building your one and Z, I think always have refusal. Because like you have more wiggle room as to what refusal is. If you want to read some tricks, what we've done in the past sometimes is we have a one and C, and we have like a specific interpretation of like native activism. So on the housing topic, it was like a bunch of native people build housing projects in like Vancouver, Canada, and that's like proof as to how they could solve the housing crisis. But if you're reading decolonization, it might be a little bit hard to say that's an example of the alternative, especially if you're a settler, because obviously the whole point is that like native, like sovereignty, and they get to decide what they want to do. So it's a little bit difficult to like explain what the alt looks like in such a specific way, unless you're reading something that's like decolonization. That's like instead the bar is just like complete like native sovereignty is like all that matters. It's rather we're just refusing the affirmative so that we can embrace a different kind of like utopic vision, and like you can kind of clarify whatever utopic vision is or like whatever you want it to be. So like refusal is generally better because you have a lot more things you can do with it, but they can get you to
Okay.
the same places.
Yeah. I was like thinking about it because I used to think that decol was like 100% material, but refusal didn't have to be. But
Yeah,
like obviously it's a KL and it's gonna be vague, but do you think decol is like less vague than most refusal like evidence?
I think so. I think decolonization like gets you pretty like it like I think if you read refusal, there's like a way to get out of these 1 AR arguments on the alt, like Culp. That's like, like, well, white people with guns are just going to kill all the native people. Like, if you read decolonization, it's pretty hard to get out of like the link to those arguments. But if you read refusal
Yeah.
and you're like, no, we're not talking about actual like decolonization happening on the ground. We're talking about like research and what it means to like think differently about in debate. So like, yeah, I would say decolonization is usually like always the more
Yeah.
material one.
Okay. So yeah, because I was like in between choosing the two. And like, well, I usually go for decol, right? But then if I want to go for framework, like, is it just like smarter to just think like take the alternative, but to defend like you win a link, framework says that like education matters, should reject them for being racist.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
because it's a little bit hard to read framework, and like obviously people like like decolonization is like an alternative. You wouldn't say you fiat it, but like the process of envisioning decolonization and using it in debate as like a solvency mechanism is very similar to the AF fiating something. So it's like it's difficult for you to be like, we don't care about anything besides representations, so we should decolonize and give all the land back. It's like, no, we should think like we should do something that is on the same level of representations, like changing our education or something like that. So yeah, I
All
think
right.
framework is you probably need refusal for it.
Like my last question before like, all right, so Am read like psychoanalysis wrong warrants to ontology.
Hey,
Like
Ethan, bro, it's Ohm. Come on,
what?
dude. It's Ohm, dude.
Ohm or Oh, my bad. Anyways, uh, so like I feel like psychoanalysis, like non-falsifiable warrants or like psychoanalysis wrong is like low-key kind of true. What is the answer if you read SetCol?
I think
Like,
a couple things. One is that if you read SetCol, you really don't need an ontology claim. I think like 95% of my debates, I go for the K. I don't need ontology. structuralism will do just fine, because I think the only thing that it does for you is it provides a kind of historical lens that's like, the link is uniquely important because the state has gotten away with doing so much shit like it for so long that it's finally about time we don't let it happen again. It's like gets you kind of cyclicality impact that's like demonstrates the stakes of the situation of like how bad settler colonialism is. Um, but when you really do want to go for ontology, I think I implicated it here on some arguments like why extinction doesn't outweigh about value to life, making a little bit more metaphysical arguments there. Then you do want to go for it, but it's never necessary. So like I don't think you should ever put too much time in the 2NR unless you really think you need to in ontology, which generally in LD debate, people think ontology is way more important than it is. Um, but if you really do want to answer it, I think there are a couple arguments. The first being the one that I had, which was like, like even if psychoanalysis is like non-falsifiable, it might be wrong. Like, what other explanation do we have for like, the instances of like things that happen that the critique mentions? Like, how else can we explain, like white people trying to act as though they are native, or things like the one drop rule versus like native people is like the opposite of like, native people are constantly disappearing because even if they have one drop, they're seen as not native. Whereas if you have one drop of, like African American heritage, you're seen as black. Like how do we explain the differences in those things? And I think like psychoanalysis in a form is like able to do that. And absent like a counter method, it's like a little bit harder. So the neg can just get away with like, well, it doesn't matter if there's problems with it, like this is the only way we can think about it. But like the other answer is kind of just like, yeah, it is falsifiable. Like the the neg is defending like an interpretation of like colonialism through and like using psychoanalysis to explain that. If psychoanalysis was like, if there was something inconsistent with the negatives perspective, that would be a material occurrence, like an example that you could give in the debate. Be like, well, what about this thing that happened? And then you could use that to disprove their thesis of the critique. For example, you could give like an example of progress, like native water rights or something, and or like Keystone Pipeline getting disrupted. And you could be like, well, how does the psychoanalysis account for that? And that might be an instance of how it could be falsified. So those two things are answers. Let me see if I have any other ones in my folder. But usually like it never gets any deeper than that, especially like NLD, like rounds are short. Maybe if you did policy, but really never else.
Another thing is you can just read cards. Like you can just
Yeah. I mean, I just reading cards in 2 hours is generally just unfavorable because you don't have like time. And like the first two arguments you can make are analytic, and they're probably the best two arguments for debate, I think personally.
Also,
Like,
I don't know if Harris mentioned this, but also like you can just say falsifiability is not a good metric because like
yeah.
things like math, economics, etc.
Yeah. That's the next thing, and you need cards for that. I think that's an example of something you need
Yeah.
cards.
Okay. Well,
Even
sorry about.
having one short one in the 1 and C is like good because a lot of people just won't respond to it.
Yeah. Putting these things in the 1 and C is good, but not the 2. I would advise against putting them in the 2.
Okay. Well, all right. Thank you. Sorry for calling you
That's fine.
Yeah, and the last thing, I think people make distinctions between clinical psychoanalysis and like specifically like linguistic psychoanalysis, and like how those things are different, because a lot of cards are talking about like Freud, when like I think Juarez is a little bit more Lacanian, a little bit more like it's different still, but if you want to think about it like that, so you can kind of like draw on the distinctions between those.
cool.
Mhm.
All right. Does anybody still here have Jonah? Do you have any questions?
Wait, what should like the 2AR go for in this instance?
Here I think what the 2 like would have been in an ideal round is first like obviously extending case and like responding to the impact defense and link turns case, and then just like going all in on like weigh the case, extinction outweighs all of their links, and not like focusing too much on like a defense of our reps, and then at the very end maybe answering ontology since that was implicated on extinction outweighs. But that would be the way I would frame this 2 if you were to do like a redo on it or something like that. Okay, are there any other questions? Jonah?
I have one more question about like link turns case.
Mm-hmm.
Like, can Harris explain it?
Yeah,
Like
of course.
like how it works, or like what the argument was.
Yeah, what the argument was and how it works.
So the link turns case is just a reason as to why if I like by winning a link to the critique by proving that the AF is settler colonial, I'm also proving that the AF is like settler because the AF is settler colonial, that's going to cause its impacts to be worse. The specific argument was about how in the Eurocene, because of like things like geographic destruction and how like colonialism is intricate in like climate change will continue, which 1AC evidence and 1NC evidence as well agrees that I think that will cause like more ice to melt in the Arctic Sea, which enables actors like the United States and other NATO countries to more easily access, like be able to access it more easily, which will increase their presence there, therefore increasing like the risk of miscalc, because there'll be like obviously more American presence in the Arctic, more interactions between American presence and Russian presence would cause things like miscalculation, which could potentially result in nuclear war.
Wait, so saying the AF is invested in SetCol like causes that?
Well, this is the link trans case argument is more material, and it's more like it kind of functions more like a policy argument. It's less reliant on like the framework representation stuff. It's like very concretely saying, like the AF is colonialism because of the critique's thesis causes things like climate change. And more explicitly, I think the Viken link that I read has an argument about why EEZs directly contribute to like mining and like pollution, which could lead to things like the melting of ice sheets. And so it's very like functional. So like AF causes ice sheets to melt because of the EEZs, which causes the US to be able to enter the Arctic, which causes conflict and standoffs.
Wait, so when you mentioned like the 2NR had a lot of cross applications?
Yeah.
I guess what was the win condition for the 2NR?
By win condition, I think I'm not sure what you mean. I think the 2NR like there's not like a specific argument the 2NR has to make or win. I think there's like a specific function the 2NR has to do. The 2NR has to do two things. One is either win K framework, so the app doesn't really get to weigh as offense, and on top of that, a link, or the app has to win why the basically there's two models of debate, and the K has to win that it wins on either one of those, and then proves that the one it does win on is true. So like if I win under K framework, I have to win that and I have to win a link. Or if I lose K framework, I still have to win that like, the consequences of the negative world are better than the consequences of the affirmative world, which is done through like the link turns case argument.
All right, thank you.
Okay. I think everybody's just heading out now. So thanks for the debate, Harris, and
Yeah,
thanks.
Get around it.
Yeah, see you guys later. Maybe Emery.